Welcome to Amazing Business Radio with best-selling author and customer service and business expert, Shep Hyken. Shep will talk with some of the smartest thinkers in business to help make you more successful in your professional and personal life. This is Amazing Business Radio with Shep Hyken.
Hello, everybody. It's Shep Hyken here. We're back with another episode of Amazing Business Radio, and I'm excited today because my guest is Isabelle Zdatny, who is the head of thought leadership at Qualtrics XM Institute. And we are going to be talking about the annual report that they have on consumer trends. They have done a worldwide report. We're going to talk about some of the biggest findings and facts and stats. I personally geek out over this, but let me tell you, as a company or a brand, and I don't care if you're B2B, B2C, or even in the government taking care of your citizens, you need to understand what customers want and expect today. And this conversation I'm going to have with Isabelle is a good place to start. Now, before we get into the interview, a quick announcement. If you've got an amazing story that you want to share or you have a question that you'd like me to answer, you can send it to me on any of the social channels out there. I'm pretty much everywhere. And if you do have a question, use the hashtag AskShep. I'll answer the questions you send in either right there on the social channel on this show or in my newsletter, which is the Shepherd Letter. And you can get that by just going to hyken.com. It's free. You can subscribe to it. I include a fun cartoon every week, as well as some customer service or experience piece of advice or a story or something that we can all learn from. All right, with that in mind, we're going to talk with Isabelle Zdatny. Isabelle, welcome to the show.
Hi, Shep. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So I did not realize, and prior to us beginning the recording today, we were talking about our histories and your history with Bruce and having worked with him before Bruce Timken. And then we may have known each other in that prior life before going to work with Qualtrics. So,
who can remember way back then? But I think that we did.
Anything pre-COVID is a fog. Anything during COVID is foggier. and then coming out, I'm just recovering. I don't know what's going on.
I call that the basement times, where we used to work out of Bruce's basement, and it all blurs together.
It does. Well, that's great. Well, you are the head of thought leadership over at Qualtrics, which, by the way, is a phenomenal organization. It's actually Qualtrics XM Institute, and you have come out with this amazing consumer trends report. I love this because I actually have my own, and I compared some of your findings to mine, and they're actually pretty close. Yours is international in scope, so it was interesting to see how U.S. consumers fare against the rest of the world, and actually, it's pretty close, isn't it?
It's pretty close. I would say the biggest regional gaps that we saw were around things like comfort using AI and comfort with organizations using personal information to tailor experiences, which I think is reflective of some of the different regulations in different regions around the world.
So do you think it's more regulations, or is it, that may be one of the reasons that companies don't get involved, but do you also think there's a difference in the comfort level? Are Americans more technologically savvy than some of the other countries, or are others even further than us?
We are not. And I think that's a good call out. There's definitely, we saw some changes in EMEA around things like the AI legislation and GDPR. I do think that there's different in personal comfort. We actually saw that consumers in Latin America and Asia Pacific region, more of them had used AI than percentage of consumers in North America or in Europe. And I do think some of it is risk aversion in different places. In the US, we're very worried about our experiences with organizations going wrong, because by and large, they tend to go okay. In regions where maybe they don't always go as well, you're like, yeah, I feel more comfortable with AI taking on these tasks. So interesting regional findings.
It is. And would you say that, again, I'm going to compare our U.S. study to, let's say, the other side of the world. Maybe it's Europe, maybe it's Asia. Are the demands that customers have in these other countries similar to what's going? Because, again, I'm comparing, and it looks like we're not too far off.
Yeah, I think that the demands are pretty close around the world. There's definitely some in the global study, I would say a big one that we tend to see differences around are things like average NPS if a consumer likes a company, which is not published in this study, but part or in this report, but as part of the same global study. So, for example, consumers in Japan or most of Northern Europe tend to give much lower NPS.
NPS meaning, so that for those that don't know it, and I can't imagine they wouldn't, but just in case, Net Promoter Score.
Net
The
promoter.
question is on a scale of 0 to 10, what's the likelihood that you would recommend? And it's a way to gauge whether a customer liked the experience enough to share it with their friends, family members, colleagues. It's a simple customer satisfaction type of question.
Yeah, it's a general kind of, it's a very popular relationship metric to kind of test the overall temperature of how consumers feel. So we tend to see some regional differences around that. I would say North America for our US, or sorry, our global consumer trend study this year, America was pretty like in the middle of those. And then we saw Latin America and again, Asia Pacific felt a little bit more comfortable with AI, a little bit more comfortable with personalization. Europe was a little bit more conservative across those dimensions. But by and large, nothing too dramatic.
So, what would you say is the number one hope, desire, expectation that customers have of the companies they do business with?
Yeah, so I think one of the key themes that just we kept seeing throughout this report is the importance of trust and
Yes.
organizations just doing what they say they're going to do. I think organizations sometimes get a little bit distracted by flashy new features and innovations, and consumers this year were pretty clear. They just wanted, clear, reliable communications. They wanted to trust the information provided to them. So I think that's what they want. They want to work with reliable organizations.
Yeah, and who doesn't? That's important. Yeah, we want that's like an expectation. So one of the things that's interesting is a lot of people say customer service is getting worse. However, I think we're tracking the same thing. Your
Yeah.
study found that fewer consumers said they had bad experiences compared to last year. Um, that means fewer last year complained more than the year before. It doesn't mean that they're all loving the companies they do
No.
business with, but fewer are, which means the trend might be going the other way. But what is your reason for people still complaining about, I wish it were better?
Yeah, I mean, don't we always? Yeah, so this year we actually found that the overall quality of experiences improved. So, for example, average satisfaction with experiences went up about half a percentage point. We found the percentage of consumers reporting that they had a negative experience with a company dropped this year. So they're getting better. I think what's changing is expectations. And so what we found is that consumers are a lot less tolerant of bad experiences. If they do have a bad experience, they are more likely to either decrease and actually this year just stop spending entirely with that organization. So we also saw that our CX metrics in here. So consumers' likelihood to, again, recommend a company, to repurchase from the company and trust a company, all of those loyalty metrics also went down. So I think rising expectations, lower switching costs means that consumer loyalty is actually more fragile, I would say, going into 2025.
All right. So we ask specifically, how many chances will customers give you before they leave? We asked, how many chances would you give a company before they leave? And we asked it, we actually sent out the study to large groups, but we sent two different studies because I felt like we'd give them survey fatigue if they had to answer 30 questions. So we put 15 to a huge group, all the same demographic. One,
Yeah.
we asked, in general, a company that you just happen to do business with versus a company you're loyal to doing
Wow.
business. And to your point, Isabelle, what do you, maybe you have this stat. How
Yeah.
many chances will a customer give a company before they say, adios, see you later, sayonara, whatever country they're in?
So I do not have this stat. If I had to guess, I would feel like 2 to 3.
Okay, get this. You are so good. This is how good you are. Uh, in a typical company who
Yeah.
you're not necessarily loyal to,
Yeah.
2.2 chances.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And if you are loyal, The difference is a half a chance, 2.7 chances, which means loyalty is buying you a tiny little bit of breathing space, but not much.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting. One of the things that we did in the analysis for this was we looked at these numbers by what we would call nice to have industries who sell discretionary goods. So like online retailers, fast food, places where it's really easy, airlines, hospitality, right? Where it's really easy. You have a bad experience, you can just switch to a different brand. And we compared that to need to have or must have industries, so like public utilities, ISPs, healthcare, right? Where you're in a more contractual relationship and it's much harder to reduce or decrease your spending afterwards. And what we found was that those nice to have industries deliver a lot fewer poor experiences. I think because of the pressure, so many of them have invested in customer experience. Only I would think about 9% of consumers reported having a bad experience with them. But when they do have a bad experience, 60% of them decrease or stop their spending afterwards. And then on the must-have side, we've seen this number ticking up historically. Even if they delivered a bad experience, it wasn't affecting customer spending. And this year, I think 14% of consumers report a bad experience with those industries. And I forget the exact amount. I think it was like 48 maybe decreased their spending or stopped afterwards. And so I think what we're seeing is those nice to have industries are raising the bar on what good customer experience looks like, going back to expectations. And that is starting to impact the bottom line of those nice to have industries. They're putting a lot of sales at risk.
So yeah.
By
So
yeah.
48%, if they have a bad experience, will decrease the spend. They won't spend as much or maybe even stop. Here's our stat. 51% compared to 48% last year felt customer service was more important than price. In other words, they would pay more. And as a result, pay more means also spend more. And as
Yeah.
companies create repeat customers, ideally one day loyal customers, the
Yeah.
increased spend with a customer that keeps coming back is higher.
Yeah. And we also, we don't have the data back for this yet, but we're currently in the middle of fielding our US consumer study. And we are actually exploring this idea of how much consumers are willing to spend on premium experiences, right? Getting that better customer service, being able to skip the line, not having advertisements, right? I think that idea of um, feeling more comfortable paying more money to have better customer experiences and service is becoming increasingly widespread across industries.
Well, if good customer service makes price less relevant, there's something else that makes it even more less relevant, and that is make it easy, convenience. Uh,
Yes.
So, yeah, 70% of the people we surveyed said they're willing to pay more if the experience is easier.
That's a huge one. If you're familiar with Old Temkin Group, we've continued to collect data around it, our core CX metrics. So we say that consumers analyze their experiences across three dimensions: success, were they able to do what they wanted to do, right? That's just pure table stakes. Is it functional? Effort, how easy or difficult it was for them to do it. So looking at things like speed and convenience. And then also emotion. How did they feel about that experience? And we have, at this point, like 11 years at least of data showing that the emotion component has the strongest effect on loyalty metrics, like likelihood to recommend. But effort's pretty close behind. Effort is incredibly
Right.
important. People
Yep.
really care about easy interactions.
Well, we've gone full circle and we're going to come back to what you started with, which is trust. That being,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, the number one, we know that just giving people great service,
Yeah.
87% of customers say great service increases their trust. So great service encompasses a lot of things. People are nice, they're friendly, they're knowledgeable, it's
Yep.
easy, convenient, et cetera, et cetera. And therefore you start to trust. And it's also a good time to take a break. So let's take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about all that you need to know related to what your customers want and expect and demand of you when it comes to creating that amazing customer experience. We're talking to the head of thought leadership with Qualtrics, experience management Institute, and that's Isabelle Zdatny. Wow, I said that's a big mouthful. All of those words, Qualtrics Experience Management Institute, Isabel. Anyway, that's who we're talking to. We'll be right back. This is Amazing Business Radio. Don't go away. Shep Hyken here with an offer that won't cost you a cent. You may have heard me talk about my annual customer service and experience research. We've surveyed thousands of customers matching the U.S. Census for age, gender, ethnicity, and geography. And we find out what customers love, hate, and want in a customer experience. What's the number one customer experience that almost every customer desires? What makes them come back? What makes them leave? Why won't they fill out surveys? What do they think of AI? Well, these questions and more are answered in the research, which, by the way, is sponsored this year by Ring Central, a leader in global communications. You can download the full report by going to hyken.com and clicking on the research tab at the top. Like I said, it won't cost you a cent, but it may make you or save you thousands and thousands of dollars when you understand your customers' expectations. Again, the website is www.hyken.com.
You're listening to Amazing Business Radio with best-selling author and customer service and business expert, Shep Hyken.
We are back on Amazing Business Radio. We are talking with Isabelle Zdatny, who is the head of thought leadership with Qualtrics Experience Management Institute. And you know what I want to spend some time talking about? I think that companies of all types, whether it be B2B, business to business, B2C, and even the government, when they send out surveys, they're trying to get information back. They're trying to get feedback so that they can maybe do a better job and improve and get their numbers up, which are all really important. So let's talk about these satisfaction surveys. And one of the stats that you had here is consumer feedback, meaning the customer it's on steady decline for the past 4 years. And the exact words were leaving organizations in the dark. So they don't know.
Yeah.
What's going on with that? How do we
Yeah.
get the feedback? If they're not giving it to us, there's got to be a better way.
It's a huge problem. And I'll say, I mean, this is the trend I feel like I have been talking about most with companies, with CX professionals. Everyone, right, wants to get their response rates up. And this is the world we live in. Consumers are providing less feedback today. We have been running this study since 2001. The percentage of consumers saying that they provided feedback directly to the organization has dropped every single year. So it is down 8 percentage points since we first started this. And that is for both after a very good and very bad experience. So today, only about a third of consumers say that they sent feedback directly to a company after having a very good or very bad experience. We also saw that not only are consumers not sending feedback to companies, they are not sending feedback to anyone. They are staying quiet about their experiences. So the percentage of consumers who post about on social media or post about their experiences on an online review site, right? Places where companies could theoretically go scrape that unsolicited, unstructured data to also understand people's experiences. Those numbers have declined. The percentage of consumers saying that they even told friends and family about a very good or very bad experience declined, especially amongst older consumers. And we saw the percentage of consumers who said that they did not tell anyone about the experience, they're completely silent about it, has increased 6 percentage points since we first started this. So there's a lot less information out there for customers or for companies to understand customers' experiences and address those rising expectations that we were talking about in the first half of this podcast.
So, Isabelle, this is about listening to customers who are out there leaving feedback, sharing feedback, but we haven't asked them for that feedback. Is there a difference in us as a company or a brand going out and saying, hey, will you spend a moment to complete this survey or, leave us feedback or whatever? How's that trending?
Yeah, so I think that actually part of the problem, part of the reason that we are seeing declining feedback rates is because of survey fatigue, because consumers get absolutely bombarded with long, irrelevant surveys about their experiences. And they don't see the companies taking action based on those insights they're sharing, right? If it takes a lot of time and effort to fill out a survey. if consumers do that for you, they're saying, I care about you getting better. I care about the future of your company, right? We're in this relationship together. And if the company isn't thanking them, acknowledging that feedback, is not making changes based on that, and then isn't making those changes visible to those customers, why would they spend their time to do that? So I think there's a little bit of survey fatigue. This feeds back into erosion of trust, that they don't trust that what they have to say is going to make any changes.
Hmm.
And I should say, when we ask about giving direct feedback to companies, some of that's responding to a survey. About 50% of consumers, after a very good experience, say that they sent direct feedback by responding to a survey. If they have a very bad experience, they actually use different channels more. They go ahead and they send the company an email. That's the most popular channel for sending feedback to companies, or they send a note through the company's website. So they're still, even if they are sharing feedback with the company, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it by filling out a survey.
Yeah, so it sounds like you get extremes. If I had, I'm just going to make up a number. If I have 100 customers and I send surveys out, I'm going to hear from a small percentage, it sounds like. And
Yes.
that percentage is either going to love me or hate me. We don't hear from everybody in the middle.
Yeah, there's definitely some volunteer bias that absolutely happens in who's responding to surveys. I think we tend to intuitively overestimate how much volunteer bias is actually at work in these. Um, and you do have a number of people in the middle who have had mediocre experiences responding to surveys. We don't ask about that in our survey, so I can't
Yep.
tell you the exact numbers there.
Wow, it's interesting. There is a company that I do business with that I'm going to say every couple, 3 months will send me a survey. And sometimes I have a bad experience. And I always say to my wife, I sure hope they send me a survey about this one. Because they don't seem to ever send me a survey when there was a bad experience. Well, guess what happened the other day? I had a bad experience and they sent the survey. So they asked me if, I don't know if it was an NPS on the scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10 or whatever, how would what's the likelihood that I would do business with, or based on this experience, what's the likelihood that I would do business with them again? I gave them a 6. Normally I do a 9 or a 10. I like that question. And then it went on to ask a number of other questions, and they had an open-ended question. So
Yeah.
I was able to give that type of feedback as well, not just numerical, but also some verbatim feedback. And I said, I love you guys.
Yeah.
Almost every time I do business, it's a great experience. However, I'm glad I'm able to share with you this one wasn't as good, and here's why. Okay. And I was really constructive about the criticism, about why I thought it was wrong, what we could have done better. And then I put in parentheses, but this is obviously not a huge problem. There's far worse things that could happen: political divide, unrest, and the rest of the, So
I'm
I put
curious to see if
with a
they're
little
analyzing
with a
that
little
like
smiley
sentiment.
face. But seriously, I think if I were a first-time customer, I might not want to do business with you again based on this. And you think I would have heard from them by now?
Yes, and I mean, maybe it just I'm too in the weeds here. There's a lot of automated programs you can use today to just close the loop with someone, right? They send you a survey.
Right.
You don't even need
Just
a
say thank
human
you.
to do it. Thank you.
Automated thank you. So here's what we found. 72% of the customers we surveyed said they don't hear back from the company after completing the survey. 71% assume the company won't make any changes, and 37 believe their feedback on a survey is not valued or taken seriously, which is why they don't do surveys.
I think I love that you have that supporting data, because that completely aligns with the narrative that I think we're seeing in our data. Consumers, to some extent, just feel like they're shouting into the abyss. Consumers are very busy. We have a lot of things to worry about. Why take your precious time to do that?
Yeah, yeah. And so well, I've got to ask you before I get into that, I want to ask you for the final wrap up on this segment of questioning with surveys. I'm going to ask you in a moment what the best way to get feedback might be. But before that, I got to know, what do you think of these companies or employees that beg you for a good score? They don't beg you for the feedback. And by the way, a friend of mine, she went somewhere and it said, if you fill out the survey, we'll give your kid, because it's a kid's thing, some prize of some kind. in parentheses, but we want an honest answer. I mean, it was real clear. All they're incenting the person to do is fill out the survey, not give them the answer. It was real clear. We want an honest answer. That I'm okay with.
Yes, I think that's what's important is that um, often we see too many organizations do score chasing where they just care about, what their NPS is or what their satisfaction score is. At the end of the day, those data points don't matter at all
They
if
don't.
people are not taking action on them. And so all feedback is a gift, and bad feedback is absolutely a gift. If consumers are telling you this is a pain point, this is a point of friction, you should cherish that because they could churn without ever letting you know why. And so definitely as you're building out incentive structures, making sure that it's incentivizing any feedback rather than that score chasing, right? You hear the car salesmen who are like, you have to give me a 10, you have to
Yes.
give me a 10.
Or
Or,
I'll lose my job and my kids
well,
won't go to
yes.
school and we won't be able to eat next week.
So, like, what is the value of that? Everyone is wasting their time. Consumers are wasting their time. The organization, someone has to go analyze those scores. Like, there's no point, right? Action is what transforms insights into value. And if you are not using those numbers as a mechanism to improve the experiences you deliver, uh, don't ask consumers about it.
Right, right. All right, let's shift to what you think the best way to get a consumer to give you the feedback is. I mean, is there a certain length of survey, a certain amount of time that might pass, or how quick you give it? What are some tips that we can share with our listeners related to that?
Lots of tips. I would say number one, just follow survey best practices, right? Garbage in, garbage out, vivid old truism. If your excuse me, if your survey is too long, consumers are not going to finish it, or they're just going to go down the line and give you random numbers that again is not useful. If you're delivering it through digital mechanisms, you need to make sure they're shorter relationship surveys, like if you're asking about net promoter score, overall satisfaction, those can be a little bit longer. Just do those once a year. Make sure you're not hitting consumers too many times. I would say, though, like my main advice to companies right now is that we need to move beyond that traditional survey-based approach to voice of the customer. If that is all your program is relying on, you are just not getting enough sample in. And as we move into this world where things are moving really fast, right? We have a rapidly evolving business landscape and consumer expectations. Periodic surveys are not enough to help fuel the decisions and the activities that your organization needs to make to be successful. So, absolutely, I don't think surveys are going away. They are still a useful source of consumer perceptions and attitudes, but you need to be supplementing that with other types of CX data, right? Can you scrape those social media posts, those online reviews? Can you marry your experience data up with your operational and behavioral data that your company already has? So I think we need to think about expanding our listening portfolio beyond just these traditional VOC surveys, because I do think that we've seen this trend every year. I would not expect it to reverse. If you do deploy a survey, make sure you are following best practices to maximize the impact and the quality of the insights that you're generating.
Yeah, I think to wrap this up, one of my favorite surveys comes from, won't tell you the name of the airline, but their initials are AA. For American Airlines, okay, anonymous airlines, whatever. But they had a survey question. And they actually have changed it a little bit. It's still at the end of the call, please stay on for a short 2-question survey. The first question, I like it on a scale of 1 to 5. What's the likelihood that you, or I mean, how would you rate the call or whatever? It's numeric. But the second one is how would you rate the agent? But what they used to have, I think, was even better. If you called again, would you want this agent to help you? Push 1 for yes, 2 for no. Boom. And then anything else you want to say about the experience? I think that lets us know, it's a good survey, quick and to the point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think often organizations just use kind of the cool CX metrics, right? Again, I feel like I'm picking on NPS, but NPS or satisfaction. And I feel like when you can find a metric like that, a lot of these are just you're basically asking customers, do you like us? But if you can find one that's more predictive, more strongly correlated, if it's more aligned with your brand promises, right? Like, is trust more important to you? Can you ask a trust question? I would love to see CX professionals get a little bit more creative and evidence-based around the metrics that they're using rather than just these are the cool, easy ones to ask. So
Well, perhaps if they would listen to this podcast episode, they just might do that.
changing the world.
All right, we're wrapping up here. One final question, and you know it's coming. Is there some incredible stat or fact or finding from your survey that you absolutely think, boy, everybody needs to know and understand this?
I would say that for me, the most shocking finding of this study was that we asked consumers how comfortable they felt with the organization using different types of unsolicited data. So things like their purchase history or their web behavior or contact center conversations, or again, those social media posts. How comfortable would they feel with organizations using that data to personalize their experiences? 2/3 of consumers say they want personalized experiences. What I found absolutely shocking was how low those numbers were. So only 45% of consumers said that they felt comfortable with companies using their purchase history to
Really?
personalize their experiences, which was shockingly low to me. Right?
That's so obvious to me. I mean, and that's such an easy one to track.
Yes.
And it's like, I'm spending money with you. I think a company or a customer would say, do you know how much money I spend with you? Treat me like I spend that much money with you.
I get mad if I like rage click and companies don't have a pop-up that's like, are you okay? I'm like, aren't you tracking my web movements? So yeah, it was crazy. Things that seemed like a harmless, even an expected thing that companies would know about you. Consumers felt very uncomfortable with that. And I think, again, this speaks to low levels of trust. I think consumers feel like they don't have a lot of control over their data, their privacy. Maybe like companies, social media companies have trained us that our data is the product, and so might be concerned about the companies they're interacting with selling that data to third parties or building profiles based on them. But again, feeding into this idea that we need to develop a more holistic listening strategy and maximize the impact of every single piece of CX data we had. It was very surprising to me how unwilling customers are, how hesitant they feel to provide organizations with the information that they need to actually improve customer experiences.
Right. And it's been a long time since I've said this, but I'm the guy that says stick a chip in my neck and follow me around, track me. And if you can deliver an experience that's better and make my life better, I'm fine with that. And I don't think I have anything I want to hide, but maybe I do. I just haven't figured it out yet.
Well, and I intuitively would think that younger consumers would feel more comfortable with their data being shared. Like, I just kind of assume everyone's listening to me all the time, but we actually did not see an age gap in that. Everyone felt very uncomfortable with it. So
Wow.
Again, I think just feeding into this narrative that there's pretty low levels of trust out there right now.
Well, this is fascinating information. I could geek out over it and I can talk to you about this for a long, long time. This has been a longer than usual episode. And by the way, I'm going to say this is probably my record for the year in length, but it was well worth it. And by the way, if anybody wants this information, all they need to do is, you've got to go to Qualtrics. I'll put it in the show notes, but you can download the Consumer Trends Report, which is how I got mine. But what's the website for that?
That's a great question.
Google it.
Qualtrics.com. I would recommend Googling Qualtrics Consumer Trends 2025, and it'll take you right there.
All right. That's what I would do. All right, everybody. That wraps it up. Another amazing episode. Isabelle, thank you so much for being a guest that has all the information that we'd ever want to know about what our customers want from us. So
thank you so much for having me.
What a great interview. We'll be back next week with another one. And this is why we call it Amazing Business Radio. And until that time, when we are here together again, please remember, always be amazing.